we kind of talked a little bit about just in terms of any sort of advice with working with your team, even at a younger level. What are some of maybe the biggest challenges you've personally had to overcome at Kenco in your career? Anything notable that you have learned a lot from?
Um, I mean, I think just one challenge in general, right, is that I'm comfortable with, but is especially when you kind of move across an organization, right? Like you're not going to be a subject matter expert in everything, right? And so
Right.
that can be hard for a lot of people because they want to be a subject matter expert at what they do on a daily basis. And I guess my kind of philosophy on that is really like, well, you surround yourself by really great people, right, who do have that expertise, who do have that knowledge, that you try and hire for those gaps. But I do think sometimes it takes time when you don't have an organization where people float across the company maybe as much, where you're like, well, but she didn't have an HR background. How in the world can she lead an HR team? Like, she has a 5-year HR background, and you're putting her over HR. And I think that that's just mindset sometimes that I have to try and break down for other people. I've been very blessed at Kenco that I have leaders who fully support kind of me and my vision for what the HR department should really look like. But I do think that there are some of those barriers where people look at you a little bit differently and they're like, well, I don't see how you've gotten here and I don't understand. And so it's trying to help them realize you don't have to always be the subject matter expert on something. You need to be a good leader, right? You need to surround yourself with the right people to be able to be kind of seen in a certain light. And then I think you need to take chances on yourself, right? I think that's something else that I tell people all the time. I'm like, sometimes I tell people, I'm like, you need to say no sometimes, right? But like saying yes is not necessarily always a bad thing, right? You don't want to say yes to the point of exhaustion and burnout, but sometimes the most growth comes from you saying yes to something that you're like, I've never done this before, but you know what? I'm going to learn it. And once I've learned it, then I'll have that, tool in my toolbox, if you will. And I'll be able to kind of go to the next challenge and it will help prepare me for that. And I think, as I've done that throughout my career at Kenco, it's been a lot of saying yes to things that I didn't really think I would have ever said yes to.
That's so funny. I think, thinking back of about growth and my one of my biggest opportunities was when I was at Whirlpool. They made a large acquisition of a company in Europe. And it was basically like an acquisition of equals from the European business, but Whirlpool was, much bigger globally. And so they tapped me to go and lead the integration for supply chain. And I was like, why would you do that? Like there's degrees in supply chain. Like I don't have a degree in supply chain. Like I don't understand like why you want me to go and do this. And I had a really strong mentor that encouraged me. They're like, this is one of these opportunities where you say yes, like go, like bet on yourself. And so I went, moved over to Europe with my family, didn't have an expertise in the function, didn't have an expertise in kind of my network there, didn't have, an expertise in the language and lots of things, but holy smokes, did I grow as a leader really, really quickly and quickly learn that all of the expertise was there. We had two teams of supply chain experts, and we just had to figure out how do we bring them together to choose the best kind of go forward model for us from there. So to second that, yeah, there's a lot of those moments where you're like, oh, but they end up being the most powerful for sure.